Okay, great. We'll get started in a few minutes. Just waiting on a few more folks to jump on. My name is Mickey. I'm the Development Director for the Non-Human Rights Project. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Yeah, and we'll get started in just a few minutes.
It's me too.
And Mickey, we're successfully streaming, so.
Okay. Great. Okay. In that case, should we get started?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Okay. So hello, everyone. For those who just joined, my name is Miki Suzuki. I am the Development Director at the Non-Human Rights Project. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this special Endangered Species Day Zoom seminar today. So today's discussion will be around the latest on Happy's case. We'll also be discussing the difference between animal welfare and non-human animal rights and why the NhRP works through the legal system and works within animal rights. In addition, to commemorate Endangered Species Day, we'll touch on our client's endangered status, what that means to us, and our legal argument. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. I'm going to open up the chat function towards the end of the discussion so that you can type in your questions towards the end, and we'll try and get through all of them, as well as some questions that supporters sent in earlier this week. So again, thank you for joining us. Today we have Elizabeth Stein, also known as Liddy. She's Happy's New York counsel and a staff attorney with the NhRP. And we also have Courtney Fern, who is the NhRP's Director of Government Relations and Campaigns. Yeah, if you'd both like to say hello and...
Hi. Thank you for hosting this, Mickey, and thank everybody for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I'm Courtney. I'm zooming in from West Hollywood, California, and just want to thank everyone for your support and for joining us on this important day to learn more about Happy, why we advocate for non-human animal rights, and a little bit about how we are celebrating Endangered Species Day.
Great, thank you. So we'll start off talking about Happy, the latest in Happy's case. So Liddy, first I wanted to ask you what's happened with the Court of Appeals, why what happened just a couple of weeks ago is so important and historic to this case, and what is next?
Sure. Thank you, Mickey. And before I even get into it, I just have to say, every time I hear myself referred to as Happy's lawyer, New York counsel, or otherwise, it seriously makes me so emotional, and it gives me chills and brings tears to my eyes at the same time, because, and this will tie into everything that we're talking about today in terms of welfare versus rights and what we are doing on behalf of Happy. Animals don't have counsel because non-human animals are legal things. And as legal things, they don't have rights, which means that they have nothing to bring to court, except in the cases that we're bringing on behalf of our non-human animal clients. because of this writ of habeas corpus, we are actually able to bring a case directly on their behalf. We're only acting as the channel for them. This is their case. So I am truly, and the legal team of the Non-Human Rights Project, we are truly Happy's counsel, and it makes me enormously proud. So getting back to your question, Mickey, it is not in the least hyperbole or hyperbolic to say that this is historic, because it is truly historic. What has happened with the Court of Appeals, which for people who might not be familiar with it, is the highest court in the state of New York. There is no court, and it's a little strange because usually the highest court in a state or in the United States is called the Supreme Court. In New York, it's just the opposite. The Supreme Court is actually the lowest court. It's the trial court, then you have an appellate court, then you have the Court of Appeals. And what we have been attempting to do throughout the course of our litigation, both on behalf of our chimpanzee clients and now on behalf of Happy, is to get to the New York Court of Appeals, because they are the final court. They are the final arbiters of the issues that we are bringing forth. And so also, to keep this in perspective, the Court of Appeals, the New York Court of Appeals, hears very few of its cases. Approximately 5% of the cases that are brought before it, where lawyers have filed motions to come before the court, only 5% are actually accepted to be heard. So it is outstanding that we are one of this 5%, and it makes this case the first time in history that the highest court of an English-speaking jurisdiction will hear a habeas corpus case on behalf of someone who is not human. And that non-human someone in this case happens to be Happy. So what will happen going forward, we are in the process of drafting our brief to the court. We don't know yet what day it's actually due. It's in approximately 60 days. Then the Bronx Zoo will be able to respond to it. We will be able to reply to their response. And then maybe 2 months after that, we should be scheduled for oral argument. And just to kind of, put the final period to the end of your question, Mickey, so you can move on to Courtney. What we will be able to do before the Court of Appeals is we will now have what I like to consider a fresh set of eyes, because what has happened is, for example, with respect to Happy, we went before the trial judge in the Bronx, who heard 13 hours of oral argument and was overwhelmed by what we had to say and the experts that we presented on behalf of Happy with respect to her autonomy and why she should be granted this right and why she should not be in the Bronx Zoo being held captive and imprisoned. But she, as she said, regrettably felt bound by intermediate courts. The Court of Appeals is not bound by any court other than itself. And fortunately, we feel very strongly that while this is a case of first impression, the cases that go to how the Court of Appeals will actually review our case are all very favorable to us. And that basically the court is saying, we've granted you this because it's so incredibly important, or we wouldn't have taken the case. So that question is now kind of out of the mix. And nobody can ever say that what we're trying to do is frivolous or meaningless or silly, because the Court of Appeals has put its stamp of approval on this issue, that it is of such significance that they need to hear it. And what they will be doing, since we're not bound by any statutes and it's only the judges looking at this, they are going to say, you know what, as a common law court, what is society like now? What are the social norms? What are the social values? What has changed since the time when animals were only deemed legal things to now? What is the science that tells us that some of these animals, because of the science we know, are so extraordinarily cognitively complex and autonomous that we need to reevaluate this paradigm of thing and human being, essentially thing and rights holder. And we are hopeful, we are confident, I hope, that when we put everything before the court, they will say, yes, the time has come to no longer recognize Happy as a thing. She needs to be recognized as a right holder, and we will grant her this right to bodily liberty and ultimately secure her freedom.
Incredible. Great. So, Courtney, I'd like to switch over to you and ask how supporters can help us as we prepare for this time, as we're preparing for the Court of Appeals to consider her case, and then wait for the court to issue a decision.
Yeah, definitely. Before I get into what everyone can do moving forward, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's gotten us to this point so far. And I'd love to hear Liddy's opinion about how she thinks it's impacted where we've gotten in terms of the case. But sorry, zooming in from my phone and all the stuff comes down. But we've had such an incredible response to our campaign to free Happy that's been going along with our litigation. And I just want to thank everyone who's participated. An amazing 1.4 million people have signed a change.org petition calling for Happy's freedom from over 90 different countries, which just shows how far Happy's story has reached across the world and really resonated with people about the wrongness of her imprisonment and the need for her to be free to a sanctuary, and for the courts to recognize her rights, which is so important. And how many people have tweeted and taken action. It's been incredible. And it's really gotten us to this point because we've galvanized such a strong community of people from around the world, from all different walks of life, who maybe don't necessarily or aren't traditional animal welfare, animal rights supporters, who understand the inherent wrongness of Happy's imprisonment and the denial of her rights by the Bronx Zoo and just society at large. So everyone's played such an important role in getting us to this point. And I think it's really shown the courts how important this issue is and that it does need to be addressed. And I'm hoping that that did play a role in, the Court of Appeals taking on Happy's case. Not only is it so important, but it's a matter of public importance that they need to address. And just going forward in the upcoming months, as we're working towards, submitting our briefs and having the Court of Appeals, or sending oral arguments before the Court of Appeals, we're going to have a lot of different ways that you can take action to raise awareness about Happy's plight, as well as raise awareness about her historic hearing that will be coming up hopefully later this year. So stay tuned for that, but just continue doing what you're doing. Just sharing any message about Happy is important, and sharing the message about non-human rights and how imprisoning them in places like zoos is wrong, is critically important to raising awareness about this issue and about Happy.
And if I would like to just add one other thing, Courtney, because clearly I agree with everything that you have said. And to the point of public importance, it is why the Court of Appeals is hearing this case, because while they're interested in, discrepancies between lower courts, whatever, it is clear that the cases that they want to hear are those of public importance. And part of public importance is that the judges look around and they see what is being discussed and how it's being discussed. And everyone's involvement has truly gotten us to this place, and I feel has played an incredible part in getting us to the Court of Appeals. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and the amount of highly influential people who have gotten involved and spoken about Happy has been incredible. I remember after we had our first rally, and I think it's the second protest we've ever held as an organization. It was in front of the Bronx Zoo. Liddy spoke. Now State Senator Jabari Brisport spoke, and he gave a beautiful speech about Happy and why her rights should be recognized and she should be free to a sanctuary. But after that, her story sort of went viral on social media, and we got Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, made a statement on a public radio show saying that something doesn't feel right about Happy being at the Bronx Zoo. New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson issued a formal statement saying that Happy, along with Patty, the other solitary elephant at the Bronx Zoo, should be freed to a sanctuary. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted about it, or tweeted about Happy. Numerous celebrities, reporters. We've had, I don't want to take this away from Liddy, but the experts and other just amazing people that have submitted amicus briefs in support of Happy, like world-renowned legal scholar Lawrence Tribe, who's also a professor at Harvard, a bunch of, I don't want to say a bunch, a lot of religious scholars, Catholic theologians, philosophers. I'm probably missing out on people, but just the breadth of support we've gotten from people, from supporters like you, and also very influential and knowledgeable people, has been amazing. And it just, Happy is so important. and the work we're doing, the work that you're supporting, it's critical to helping not only Happy, but endangered species like her, because the only way to truly help, and now I'm getting into the later part of our discussion, but to help, imperiled species survive is not to hold them captive and imprison them in barren enclosures, but it's to help those in the wild survive in their community and be a part of the ecosystem that they've always been meant to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. Great. And I know we said questions at the end, but I do have this one question, which I think is a good sort of tie into what we're discussing right now. Olga on email asked us earlier this week, what makes this different from our past cases with our chimp clients, as well as Minnie. Liddy, I know you've been here for all of those cases, so maybe you've done that.
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. And I think might have touched on it in the very beginning. What makes it different, and this is why our goal has been to get to the Court of Appeals in the state of New York. And just for Olga, in terms of our chimpanzee cases, they were all New York cases as well. The reason this is different is because the Court of Appeals is not bound by anybody. It is not bound by any prior decisions. What has happened to us in the past, and this was our chimpanzee cases, they would go up to an appellate level, and unfortunately for us, we believe that they were wrongly decided when they went up to the appellate level. What happened, some of the decisions, just getting into the legal weeds a little bit, basically when you boiled it down, what the decisions were saying was that if you are not a human being, you could not have a legal right. They were just putting, the period at the end of the sentence. They framed it in terms of duties and responsibilities, that in order to be a rights holder, you also have to be able to bear duties. Of course, our counter argument was, well, clearly there are human beings, whether they be infants, whether they be incompetent human beings, whether they be comatose human beings who cannot bear duties, but clearly have and should have rights. And the answer to that was, well, they're human. So what the courts were basically saying is, whether it be the chimpanzees, whether it be Happy, whoever it may be, could not have this right to bodily liberty simply because they are not human. And that, sadly, is what we have been stuck with throughout our cases. And again, that's what happened with Happy. As much as it appeared that the Judge Tuitt in the Bronx would have loved to rule in our favor, because she came out and said the Bronx was not a place for Happy. She felt that she couldn't because of these other decisions. So now the Court of Appeals will look at all of these issues of, do you have to have duties? There's a social contract issue. There's a question of transferring from one location to another. Is that appropriate habeas corpus relief? They're going to look at every single issue and decide for themselves what they think the answer is. And based on a concurring opinion from one of the Court of Appeals judges in a previous case, which, although they didn't take the case because of a procedural reason, it was Judge Fahey who said, listen, we have to look at this differently. This is not a definitional question. This, you have to look to the species and say, is this species ripe for rights, essentially? So we are hopeful that will be the lens through which the judges will now be hearing our case. And again, basing it, we think, if not entirely, to a very large extent, on the extraordinary experts that we have continued to put forth, both respect to the chimpanzee cases, our chimpanzee clients, and now with respect to Happy, our elephant client.
Great. Yeah, I thought that was a great question. Okay, so thank you, Liddy. Now, to switch gears a little bit, I want to talk about the difference between animal welfare and animal rights. So Liddy and Courtney, both of you have worked within animal welfare and then within animal rights through the Non-Human Rights Project. So drawing from both of your experiences, could you talk a little bit about what the fundamental differences are between the two?
Courtney?
I can go first.
Sure.
So I see it as we're sort of both aiming for the same issue. We want to end, or generally, we want to end the suffering of non-human animals. Animal welfare goes about it I see it as small steps by trying to incrementally end various types of harm that certain non-human animals suffer. And I'll use elephants as an example. Animal welfare laws will say ban the use of a bull hook, which is great. It will end, they will no longer suffer the harm of a fire poker type device that's used to control them and prod them. But they're still held captive. They're still exploited in fairs and zoos and other manners. It doesn't end the underlying cause of their suffering, which is the deprivation of their freedom. And that's what rights seeks to address and ultimately alleviate. So by rights, we're jumping ahead, and rather than taking several small steps to end the suffering of non-human animals, we're going to the very end, the ultimate source of ultimate source of their suffering, which is the deprivation of their freedom. And by recognizing their right to bodily liberty, those currently held captive in the United States, the species that we currently represent, will no longer be no longer be allowed to be held captive in a manner that deprives them of exercising their autonomy, and it will require that they be sent to sanctuaries where they can live with respect and dignity. And it will also prevent future generations of those species from being brought into the United States and held captive and exploited. So welfare is just very small steps to end certain types of harm, whereas rights addresses the underlying cause of the harm. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree. For me, I think perhaps the clearest example of the distinction between the two is it's Endangered Species Day. We have the Endangered Species Act, we have the Animal Welfare Act, we have state animal cruelty laws, we have all kinds of state and federal laws ostensibly to protect non-human animals. Notwithstanding that fact, Happy is still in the Bronx Zoo. And the Bronx Zoo claims, and we are not disputing the fact, that they are in compliance with all of these laws. And our answer to that is, who cares? These laws are minimal. They're basic. They're essentially to keep an animal alive. That is not, and that is the difference between animal welfare and animal rights. If Happy has this right, she will no longer be at the Bronx Zoo. We're not asking the Bronx Zoo to feed her more, to give her more water, to check on her more, which are, welfare type responses. That's not what we're asking for. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in getting her out. And if she had the right to bodily liberty, she would not be there. And we've kind of made the analogy to a human being held captive by the wealthiest person in the world. And that human being is given everything, the best food, the best clothing, is in the best, most beautiful palace. But that human being cannot leave. That human being cannot make any choices. That human being cannot be with whom that human being chooses, cannot speak to whoever that human being, with whom that human being wants to speak, nothing. There is not a question that that human being's right to bodily liberty would be violated. So why is it any different for Happy? It shouldn't be. So that's how I kind of look at the welfare versus rights dichotomy. And I have practiced animal welfare for many, many years before I became involved with the Non-Human Rights Project. I feel that, the work that's being accomplished by animal welfare attorneys and activists is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But, as Courtney said, it's you have to get to that underlying reason for what's happening to the animals. And that's because they're being denied any rights whatsoever.
And just, Liddy, I love hearing you speak because you're so eloquent. And so
I thank you. You're looking through the lens of love, trust me.
But you brought up a good point, and I Mickey, if it's okay, just to touch maybe a little bit about Minnie, our other elephant client, because what you brought up about welfare laws, we have all these welfare laws. We have the Animal Welfare Act, we have the Endangered Species Act, we have the Marine Mammal Protection Act, we have so many other acts, and animals are still suffering. And let's take elephants, for example. Minnie, our elephant client in Connecticut, who we filed a habeas petition on behalf of Minnie, and there were two other elephants that were held captive with her, Beulah and Karen, who have since died. We often get asked why Minnie's currently held alone in solitary confinement at the Comerford Zoo property in Goshen, Connecticut. She's not been seen in public in 2 years. We do have verification that she is still alive. The USDA recently did an inspection of their property. So we know she's just languishing there. We have a general sense of what her life is like based on records we've received through FOIA requests. And we'll be making some new records public, which just further shed light on how inadequate the Animal Welfare Act is in protecting elephants like Minnie, but people often ask why doesn't someone go in and do something? Why don't they remove Minnie? Because it's, very clear that the manner in which she's being imprisoned is I mean, tantamount to torture. I mean, she's held alone. She's deprived of anything that's natural to her. She can't engage in any innate activities. But the Animal Welfare Act, according to the USDA, the Comerford Zoo is not violating any aspect of the Animal Welfare Act. And so there's nothing that they can do unless there is a violation of the Animal Welfare Act, and it merely is just to keep her alive. There are such minimal requirements, just providing food, shelter, some veterinary care. As Liddy said, that these welfare acts, while I guess they're important, it's just the minimal standards to keep the animals alive, really. And that's why rights are so necessary, because it doesn't matter how many welfare laws you put into place, as long as Minnie's still allowed to be held, Minnie, Happy, any, self-aware, autonomous, non-human animals allowed to be imprisoned, there's going to be suffering. And the only way to put an end to that is to recognize their right to bodily liberty.
Because, and just to your point, Courtney, I think it's because these laws have nothing to do with autonomy. They have nothing to do with how these animals truly need to live. And it's just kind of a recognition that this is where they are. So this is how we'll try and protect them.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Okay, so again, today is Endangered Species Day, so we want to talk a little bit about that. So while our client's endangered species isn't a main focus of our legal argument, it's definitely an integral part of the conversation at large, with our opponents, our opposition, like zoos, claiming an educational need to display elephants and other non-human animals, as well as the argument about conservation. So I wanted to ask Liddy first, what's your response to the claim that there's an educational purpose in displaying elephants like Happy at the Bronx Zoo?
To be kind, I would say disingenuous, because how is it even possible to claim? I mean, so we're talking about Happy. So here we have an elephant. If she was in the wild, she would be acting the way she has evolved to act. She would be walking 10 to 20 miles a day. She would be living in a herd with a matriarch. In all likelihood, at this point in her life, she would be the matriarch of that herd. She would be making decisions constantly throughout the day: where to forage, where were the best places to forage, who should go out to do something, is there potential trouble, are there warning signs? Elephants, as everybody I believe knows, mourn their dead and have an excessive capacity for empathy. So that if the component was educational, this is what we would be trying to teach our children. Yet, what do we have? We have Happy in this very small enclosure where I guess she can go in and out periodically. Her in spot is a stall in some sort of enclosure. Her out spot is minimal, with clearly no herd with whom to communicate and to make decisions. You have a monorail buzzing above her with people looking down. If they see her, what are they possibly going to see? Her back, with her swaying back and forth, engaged in stereotypical behavior, demonstrating that she is suffering where she is. So how can there possibly be an educational component to something that is so dire. And this is why I had to start by just saying disingenuous, because truly, if you wanted there to be an educational component, which there should be, I am such a fervent believer in humane education and teaching our children. But what we should be teaching our children is not to sit in a monorail with a box of popcorn looking at this elephant, but teaching our children what elephants, the beauty of them, the glory of them, what they were born to be, what they have evolved to be, and what they should be allowed to be. That's education.
Yeah, definitely. And Courtney, I was hoping you could touch on the conservation argument that's often brought forward.
Yeah, I guess it touches a little bit on education because oftentimes elephants and other non-human animals such as happy are deemed by zoos or called ambassadors for their species. And I guess that's that they've been brought here to raise awareness about their species. I don't understand how that can be justified. The imprisonment of an elephant is in any way be justified by calling her an ambassador for her species. But in terms of conservation, nothing about holding happy or any elephant or any endangered or non-human animal captive promotes the conservation of that species. In the United States, elephants held captive here that are bred, they are not sent back into the wild to repopulate dwindling populations. Rather, they are just repopulating the captive population here in the United States. And so there's no conservation aspect in terms of increasing the net number of wild members of elephants. Also in the US, zoos historically have imported elephants from Africa or Asia, which just disrupts the ecosystem and doesn't help conserve the species in any way. So by imprisoning animals in zoos, it doesn't help the species. It's very clear. We'd be supportive of community-based approaches where you work with members of the community where those or local members of the community where the species are native to help with the preservation of their native habitat and the species in general, and compassion-based approaches that are geared more towards education and informing the public about how to better help the species. But there's no part of holding happy captive in a small 1 acre enclosure that is barren and that she's deprived of anything that is similar to her natural habitat is helping Asian elephants.
Yeah. And I want to open up for questions. So I've opened up the chat box now. So if you do have a question, please type your questions in. And we're getting a few already. Oops, sorry. They're coming in fast. So let me see. So Eliza asks, and either of you can jump in to answer, which are the key books available about non-human rights?
That's a great question. Well, certainly Steve Wise's book, Unrattling the Cage.
Absolutely.
Would be my first go-to. Courtney, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think Steve's books are
Yeah.
probably I mean, I think really were the first on truly, non-human animal rights and the idea of legal personhood and the right to bodily liberty. So rattling the cage.
Right, rattling the cage. Did I call it unrattling the cage?
I think with
I'm thinking of
unlocking the cage.
Right, I'm thinking of our movie. So I'll definitely, at this point, let me put in a plug for the documentary as well, which if you haven't seen it, please, it's a must see. That's Unlocking the Cage. Sorry.
And we can have Lauren, our communications director, who is much better versed in all of the books that have been written on non-human animal rights from a legal and a non-legal perspective. We can circulate a list after the Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can read our briefs.
All on our website. So Leo asks, how does Happy's case affect other non-human species and other elephants, I guess?
Would you like me to, Courtney, you want to take it? Or
Sure. I mean, Happy's case is about Happy. So, and Liddy, please correct me if I'm misspeaking, but if Happy is deemed a legal person with the right to bodily liberty, it will merely affect Happy, but there will be precedential effect. So if we do move forward with another case on behalf of another elephant, we will have Happy's case as support that, another elephant has been declared a legal person with the right to bodily liberty and hopefully sent to a sanctuary.
Right, because, yes. No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. So Happy's case, but I think the precedent that this will set, like with Kavan's case, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Kavan, the elephant that was held in solitary confinement in a zoo in Islamabad, but his case had far-reaching effects when he was, the judge stated that he had rights and he's now at a sanctuary in Cambodia. And so my hope is that Happy's case will also have that worldwide effect if she is in fact declared a legal person or rightly recognized she is a legal person, or she isn't a legal person. She is an autonomous being who has the right to liberty, and once a judge declares that, hopefully that will have a far-reaching impact as well to show the importance of this.
Yeah, because what's interesting about habeas corpus is the decision for that either whether it be a human being or in this case a non-human animal. So the decision really is just about Happy. But in the state of New York, and again, it depends upon what this is. Should we win at the Court of Appeals level? It would very much depend upon what the court says. But as Courtney said, this is a Court of Appeals decision is binding in the state of New York. It would be, although it's not binding in other states or other jurisdictions, it is certainly very persuasive. So I would think for other elephants in the state of New York, it would bode very, very well for them. I think that, and again, depending upon what the reasoning is, and we'll have to wait for our decision, but if the court does rule in our favor because of an elephant's autonomy, I think that we can probably then make a very persuasive argument, again, with respect to chimpanzees and cetaceans as well, who, where the science has demonstrated that they are extremely autonomous and cognitively complex. With respect to other, and this is not quite on point to the question, but just as far as cetaceans are concerned, we will only bring a case on behalf of a non-human client where we believe we will, in the event we succeed, we have a place for that client, because the goal of habeas corpus is the release of the prisoner, which means that the prisoner has to then go, whether it be a human being who could possibly be let out on the street, or might have to go to another place for whatever reasons. Our non-human clients cannot either be let back into the wild, back into the ocean. They just, after having been kept captive for this many years, they would not survive. So we have to have a sanctuary type setting for them to go, where they will be able to really experience perhaps not the exact same autonomy that they would in the wild, but something very close to it.
Great. Yeah, that's great, because I think a lot of people had similar questions in the chat box. I hope we hit a couple of those. So the next question by SA, someone's been doing their homework, it looks like. They ask, how critical do you think Judge Fahey is to this?
Oh boy, it's the be all and end all. Yeah, yes. Courtney, I'll take it, and then please, I would love for you to take it as well. But he, in my very humble opinion, he was critical. His concurring opinion was critical to our now getting to the Court of Appeals. Not a question in my mind. There were so many takeaways from his opinion, but one of my greatest takeaways is when he basically said that this is something that he has been thinking about. Because remember, this is our fourth attempt to get before the Court of Appeals. The 3 prior attempts, we were rejected. And in Judge Fahey's concurrence, in our 3rd attempt, he said he has been thinking about this and pondering this question since the first time. And that, he was basically sorry that he had waited so long to hear this case. So I think that this is something that he very much wants to hear. I think he broke the ground for us getting there. What we don't know, which is really interesting, all of the judges ruled on our motion for leave to appeal to the court. We know we got 2, because for the appeal to be granted, for the motion to be granted rather, you need 2 judges. For all we know, we only got 2. For all we know, we got all of them. So we have no way of knowing what transpired. But to your question, I think that he's been crucial in this. And I think from my perspective, and I've said this before, his concurrence is almost a roadmap for me in thinking about how we are responding in our brief.
And he, this viewer had a 2-parter. So is there anything that supporters can do? Like, can they write to judges? Can they reach out?
And Courtney, I'm going to let you handle this, but I don't think the court looks favorably upon people writing to them. I think, I really don't know that to be true. That is what my gut is telling me, that it wouldn't inure to our benefit for our supporters to be writing to the judges. But I'm going to leave it to Courtney and Mickey to explain what you can do to show your support for Happy's freedom.
Yeah, and I hate to keep saying in the coming weeks, but we want to be very careful and diligent in the actions that we put out and make sure they're as meaningful and as effective as possible. But I agree with Liddy. I don't think contacting the judges is necessarily appropriate or the best course of action to help Happy and to help raise awareness about her case. I think we'll have actions for New York residents so that you can contact your state elected officials so that they can publicly come out in support of Happy's right to liberty, their hopes for her to be freed, as well as for people who don't live in New York to contact your federally elected officials and ask that they come out and support, since this is a landmark case. This is the first high English speaking jurisdiction high court that will be considering the rights of a non-human animal. So getting the support of elected officials, not necessarily in support of us winning our case, but in support of Happy, her right to liberty and her right to be sent to a sanctuary, is going to be very important. And that, in my opinion, is the most effective way in terms of getting high profile individuals involved. I think that will be the most effective. And we're going to have really easy ways for you to do that. Action alerts where you just fill out your name and it will contact your elected officials on your behalf. And also, I know it can sometimes feel like we're asking you to do the same things, but sharing posts that we put on social media, Twitter is particularly effective in terms of raising awareness and hopefully getting the media to cover Happy's story, our work on her behalf, getting excitement about her upcoming case. We really just want to really build a global movement behind Happy and her hearing. And so that's what we're going to be working towards, because this is a momentous, not to put any pressure on Liddy, but a really momentous case. And we just want to, we want the world to be watching and supporting Happy, and everyone to really know and, how important this is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a really good segue into a question that we get quite often. Since you mentioned Kaban, I want to talk a little bit about Cher's involvement. Can we get Cher involved, or other celebrities involved? What's the suggestion there?
We'd love to have Cher's support. It's easier said than done to get, celebrities are very busy. They are contacted by so many different organizations. But we've reached out to Cher. She's been so supportive of freeing other elephants. So we hope that she'll get on board and help raise awareness about Happy's case and get involved with the fight to free her to sanctuary. But we do, Brian May, the guitarist in the band Queen, has been very supportive of the campaign to free Happy. He's posted on Instagram about her numerous times, and we're so grateful for his support. And it really does help to get celebrities involved. So if you have contacts with celebrities that may want to, get involved and find out ways to help Happy, put them in touch, or tag them on Instagram or Twitter. And we'll send out afterwards. We have a blog post that has sample tweets to tweet about Happy, and we'll be updating it with new ones and new graphics in light of Happy's historic upcoming hearing. But if you need sample language for tweets, we have that as well.
Great. So next question is from Jan. She asks, are animal sanctuaries, and we're talking about like PAWS and the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee, are they held to a legal standard, or are they regulated? How does that work?
Courtney, are you familiar with the standards?
Yeah, so in the United States, they are licensed by the USDA as an exhibitor. So they do have to abide by all the standards that the USDA sets forth. There's also an organization, an accrediting body in the US. It's independent. It's called the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, also known as GFAS, and they accredit sanctuaries. And their standards are we agree with the standards that they hold sanctuaries to, but there is no official accrediting body. Like, anyone can call themselves a sanctuary. So you really, you can look to see if they're accredited by GFAS, but that's, you don't necessarily have to be accredited by GFAS to be a good sanctuary. Really looking to see how they treat the animals, if they're allowed if they're allowed to live freely, if there's no breeding, no human interaction, like paid interaction with people, really get a feel for the sanctuary. But GFAS is a good standard to look at if they're GFAS accredited, but I believe that's only in North America. But like I said, you really have to look at the sanctuary as a whole to see, how they're treating the animals that live there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so next question is by Alexandria, but we also get this question a lot. I've gotten it through email, and the question is about why does it take so long, I guess? why does the process, in Happy's case, why does it take as long as it has?
I think it's gone quickly.
Yeah. It's sometimes I think it's gone quickly. Other times I feel like I've been doing it for 100 years. But I think it's because we always say this is a marathon, not a sprint. This is a change in history. This is and if you look at any change in history, it's historic. It which means that it goes over an extended period of time. This has been a cultural phenomenon, a legal phenomenon for years and years and years. And, as long as it seems to feel as it's been taking, it really isn't, because we are attempting to change something at such a fundamental base level that to do so is it takes a very long time. And when we started this, when we started to file our lawsuits, I didn't think we would achieve as quickly as we did. I didn't know how long it would take for us to finally get, if ever, an order to show cause, this writ of habeas corpus issued on behalf of one of our non-human clients. And we did, on behalf of Hercules and Leo. And then we did on behalf of Happy. And now we are going to the Court of Appeals. And, we don't know how the court is going to rule, but every time it is truly looking at that wall that's been built between human beings and non-human animals and taking that wall down brick by brick by brick. And sadly, we can't take a bulldozer to it, because that's not how civil rights change. And this is truly a change in civil rights. Civil rights change, taking that wall down, those bricks down, brick by brick by brick. And we have definitely put a hole in that wall, and we're looking through it, and we are seeing light at the end of it. So while it feels like a long time, this is something, you're in it for the long haul. So I say to all of our supporters, if they feel that it seems like it takes so long, it's not. Think of what we have accomplished and what we will continue to accomplish. And just one other little thing that I will say, because what I used to find so frustrating doing animal welfare work was how long the legislative process took. It felt like forever that you would try and get a law passed. And remember, these weren't rights laws, these are welfare laws. And you'd go through committee and you would try and get people on, senators on board, Congress people on board, politicians on board. Nothing, it felt as though nothing ever happened. So at least with this, I feel like something really is moving.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's one of the reasons why I felt, since I work on legislation a lot, and that's what my background has been, and on campaigns, that's why I'm amazed at how quickly Happy's case has moved, because compared to legislation, it can, something like this can take a decade, if that,
right.
Longer than a decade.
Yes.
and Happy's, it's been a very seamless process getting it to the Court of Appeals. I mean, it's amazing how it's there, her case is being heard. It's sort of like, I mean, I just let everyone know, when we found out, it was like, I was notified at like 6 a.m. We all got on a Zoom call, and it was just incredible.
Everyone was crying.
Yeah.
It was just the intensity of the emotions, because this is, we have all, whether it be on the communications end, the legal end, whatever it is, thousands upon thousands of hours have gone into this. And I can tell you from my perspective, it's hours well spent. And I look forward to thousands and thousands more.
Great. So we've hit the hour, but we still have so many good questions to get through. Courtney and Liddy, would you mind staying on for a couple more minutes?
Sure.
Great. So actually if anyone needs to jump off, thank you so much for joining us. We'll try and get through these questions for you. So a lot of people are asking about where we're going next, what species we might be considering, what states. So or what countries as well. So can we touch on that a little bit?
I can talk about states. We've been pretty open about where we're going next. We plan on filing in California by the end of the year this year. And we also plan on filing in Colorado, hopefully this year or next year. In terms of species, we are collecting more the scientific evidence and the requisite expert affidavits for orcas, gorillas, dolphins, the species we've always named as those that we would, the next in terms of who we would represent. So that's sort of next on our list. I wish Steve or Kevin were on to talk a bit about our international work.
Yes.
I do know that we are working in Israel, in India, in terms of cases, and we're helping out with a case in Ecuador. I think there's a constitutional rights of nature case that has an animal rights element to it. And I'll leave it at that because I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah, and I have nothing else to add because I would not want to misspeak either.
Okay. And then there's a couple of questions here I'm sort of combining. There's a lot of questions about what this case means for farmed animals. So maybe Liddy, you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. This case actually has nothing to do with farmed animals. This case has everything to do with Happy. This case has everything to do with elephants because all of the expert affidavits deal with elephant cognition and elephant autonomy. As far as farmed animals are concerned, we really, at this juncture, we just don't know enough about them. As elephants have been studied, as great apes have been studied, as cetaceans have been studied, the farmed animals have not, to the best of my knowledge. So what the future is, I don't know. But what I would say, and this is actually an issue a legal issue that we run into because, our opponents say, well, if Happy gets granted her right to bodily liberty, we can't eat meat anymore, which is nonsense. This granting Happy's right to bodily liberty, recognizing her right to bodily liberty, has no bearing whatsoever on anybody's ability to eat anything they want. I guess, other than elephants. But this has absolutely nothing at this stage to do with farmed animals. But again, what the future is, remains to be seen. And that's kind of the beauty of what we're doing.
Yeah, great. And Courtney, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No. Yeah, I agree with what Liddy said. You know, we're looking at what we're working on right now, and the species that we're advocating on behalf of are, elephants, great apes, and cetaceans.
Right. Okay, great. So I have a question from Nigel. He asks, are happy and other imprisoned animals owed something for their wrongful imprisonment? So is there some kind of legal compensation or punishment for those who imprison?
That's a very interesting question. Well, there's no criminal punishment for their imprisonment. This is, there's no crime that's being committed here. This is a civil action. There is, it's interesting. I've never even thought about that notion of being, happy, being entitled to be compensated for her imprisonment. I can't answer that. It's not something that we're considering, but it's yeah. I know. I'm not sure where you're going, because if what you're thinking of is how if a human being's rights are being violated, they can sue for a violation of their rights. Again, this is a habeas corpus action, which in and of itself is a very different type of action. The element of this case, what you hope to achieve, is not money damages, not anything monetary, but your freedom and your release. So it would not be, you would not get monetary damages through a habeas corpus action.
Right. Interesting. Really interesting to think about.
It is. It's fascinating.
Okay, so I think we are out of time, but just wanted to let you, Liddy and Courtney, if you had any last final things you wanted to bring up, mention.
Just thank you, everyone, for joining us and for your support of the work we're doing, and for your support of Happy's Freedom. And we look forward to bringing more updates and ways that you can help in the near future.
And yes, thank you. We couldn't do it without our supporters. We rely on you more than you will ever know. So thank you. Please do everything that Courtney and Nikki are suggesting in terms of staying involved. And we will, what I can promise you is that we are doing our very, very best to secure Happy's freedom.
And if I did miss anyone's question, I'm so sorry. Please feel free to email any of us at any time. I'm putting our main email address in the chat box right now, and it will be directed to the right person. So thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us. And I don't know if we should say Happy Endangered Species Day, but I hope everyone's doing something to commemorate that. So thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.